Have you ever felt that the more deeply you think, the more disconnected you become? That the more you understand, the less people seem to want to listen? You're not imagining it. Throughout history, society has always been wary of deep thinkers. Not because they are wrong, but because they see what others refuse to. From Socrates to Nietzsche, from Galileo to Tesla, the world has a habit of silencing those who challenge the status quo. It's not intelligence itself that people resist, it's the discomfort it brings. The unsettling truth is that those who think deeply don't just offer new ideas. They force others to confront their own limitations. And human nature does not forgive that easily. But why does this happen? Why does intelligence, more than physical strength or wealth, provoke such resistance? The answer lies in human psychology. When you stand next to someone physically stronger than you might admire their power. When you see someone with more money, you may envy them, but it doesn't feel personal. But when you meet someone whose intellect vastly exceeds your own, something different happens. Instead of admiration or envy, there's discomfort, sometimes even resentment. This phenomenon is known as the mirror effect. A deep thinker, simply by existing, reflects back the intellectual limitations of those around them. And for many, this is intolerable. Even when a deep thinker says nothing at all, their presence alone is enough to make others feel exposed. But what is it about intelligence that triggers such a reaction? The answer becomes clearer when we examine how different forms of superiority affect the human mind. Unlike physical strength or material wealth, intelligence is deeply tied to identity. We define ourselves by our thoughts, beliefs, and understanding of the world. When confronted with someone who challenges what we take for granted, it can feel like a direct attack, not just on our ideas, but on our very sense of self. Instead of admiring intelligence, many people instinctively resist it. Not because the deep thinker is arrogant or dismissive, but because their very existence forces others to confront uncomfortable truths. This is why, throughout history, intellectuals and visionaries have often found themselves on the fringes of society. Their insights don't just challenge ideas, they challenge egos. And human beings, by nature, will go to great lengths to protect their ego from discomfort. Think about your own experiences. Have you ever tried to introduce a deep or complex idea in a casual conversation, only to be met with blank stares or awkward silence? Have you noticed how quickly people change the subject when a discussion moves beyond surface-level chatter? This isn't just coincidence, it's a defense mechanism. When people encounter a deep thinker, their brain goes into self-preservation mode. Instead of curiosity, they feel resistance. Instead of engagement, they dismiss. Interestingly, studies show that confidence is often valued more than intelligence in social settings. People are naturally drawn to those who project certainty, even if their ideas are shallow. This explains why charismatic but simplistic thinkers gain more influence than those who speak with nuance. History is full of examples. Populist leaders, motivational speakers, and viral influencers thrive by telling people what they want to hear, rather than challenging them to think critically. Meanwhile, those who question widely accepted beliefs often struggle to find a broad audience. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more someone seeks truth, the more disconnected they become from the majority. The mirror effect doesn't just expose society's intellectual limitations, it reveals why change is so difficult in the first place. But the question remains, if intelligence is so threatening, is there scientific proof that people actually fear it? Modern neuroscience confirms what deep thinkers have always suspected. Intelligence can be intimidating on a biological level. Studies show that when people feel intellectually inferior, their brain's amygdala, the region responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes highly active. In simple terms, deep thinking doesn't just make people uncomfortable. It triggers a primal survival response, similar to the way we react to physical danger. But why would intelligence activate the same fear circuits as a life-threatening event? The answer lies in human evolution. For most of history, survival depended not on being the smartest person in the room, but on being accepted by the group. Our ancestors thrived in tribes where social harmony meant safety. To be rejected by the group was to be cast out into the wilderness, alone, vulnerable, and at risk of death. This is why human brains are wired to prioritize social acceptance over intellectual pursuit. When someone highly intelligent enters a social setting, they unknowingly disrupt this delicate tribal balance. Their presence challenges existing beliefs, social norms, and group dynamics. This, in turn, activates the brain's defense mechanisms, treating the deep thinker as a potential threat rather than just a person with a different perspective. This explains why many intellectuals feel isolated, not because they lack social skills, but because their intelligence makes them stand out in a world that values fitting in over standing out. A 2021 study at Stanford University uncovered something even more revealing. The rejection of deep thinkers is context-dependent. When people interact with an intellectual one-on-one, they feel less threatened. But in group settings, the threat response spikes dramatically. Why? Because in groups, social status becomes more important. People don't just react to intelligence itself, they react to how others perceive them in comparison. If someone feels outshined by a deep thinker, they instinctively try to undermine or exclude them, not necessarily out of malice, but as a way to protect their own social standing. This is why deep thinkers often have profound conversations in private settings, yet struggle to engage in larger social environments. It's not that their ideas are unwelcome, it's that their presence disrupts the social hierarchy. Psychologists have identified several cognitive biases that further explain why intelligence is often met with resistance. At the Dunning-Kruger effect, people with low ability often overestimate their intelligence, while highly intelligent people tend to doubt themselves. This creates friction. Those who know little often believe they know more than they do, making them more likely to dismiss deeper thinkers. A status quo bias. The human brain prefers familiar ideas over new, complex truths. Intelligence often introduces disruptive thoughts, which make people uncomfortable. At the backfire effect. When people are confronted with information that contradicts their beliefs, they don't change their minds, they double down. Deep thinkers often face this reaction when introducing challenging ideas. In the digital age, social media has amplified this rejection of intelligence. Algorithms prioritize engagement over depth, meaning that emotionally charged, simplistic content spreads faster than thoughtful, well-reasoned arguments. Look at the most viral content online. Short, catchy, and often misleading. Simple narratives, easy-to-digest slogans, and dramatic statements outperform complex discussions. The more intellectual someone is, the harder it is for them to compress deep ideas into bite-sized, viral-friendly content. As a result, society increasingly favors entertainment over enlightenment, making it even more challenging for deep thinkers to gain widespread acceptance. But this raises a deeper question. If society resists intelligence, what does it actually embrace? If intelligence and deep thinking are often met with resistance, what does society naturally embrace? The answer lies in something far more primal. Certainty. Human beings have an innate craving for stability. We like things to be predictable, simple, and easy to understand. Intelligence, however, introduces uncertainty. It challenges long-held beliefs, forces people to reconsider their assumptions, and exposes the limits of their knowledge. This is why conformity often wins over critical thought. Throughout history, societies have gravitated toward leaders, ideologies, and narratives that provide clear, definitive answers, even if those answers are flawed or misleading. People would rather feel right than go through the discomfort of deep intellectual exploration. Consider how this plays out in different areas of life. In religion. Many religious institutions have historically resisted scientific discoveries because they introduce uncertainty. It's easier to believe in an unchanging doctrine than to wrestle with evolving knowledge. In politics. Simple slogans and strong, unwavering leaders tend to gain more support than nuanced, well-reasoned policies. People prefer a leader who sounds confident over one who admits complexity. In media. Sensationalized news spreads faster than deep analysis. Emotional outrage gets more clicks than careful deliberation. This preference for certainty over complexity creates a society where deep thinkers are not just ignored, but actively resisted. Their ideas make people uncomfortable, not because they're wrong, but because they introduce ambiguity. But there's a paradox here. While society resists deep thinkers, it also depends on them for progress. Every major breakthrough in history, whether in science, philosophy, or art, came from someone who dared to challenge the status quo. Take Galileo Galilei. He was condemned for suggesting that the Earth revolves around the sun, an idea that contradicted religious doctrine at the time. Or Socrates, who was sentenced to death for questioning Athenian beliefs and encouraging independent thought. These thinkers weren't rejected because they were unintelligent. They were rejected because their intelligence threatened the comfort of certainty. This raises an important question. If intelligence is necessary for human progress but often leads to isolation, how can deep thinkers navigate a world that resists them? If intelligence is crucial for progress, why does society instinctively resist it? The answer lies deep within human psychology. Our brains are not naturally wired for truth-seeking. They are wired for survival and social cohesion. Psychologists have identified several cognitive biases that explain why people prefer familiar, comfortable ideas over challenging intellectual insights. A cognitive ease. The brain favors information that is simple and familiar because it requires less mental effort to process. When an idea is complex, people instinctively feel uncomfortable and are more likely to reject it. A system justification theory. People have a psychological tendency to defend the status quo, even when it works against them. Instead of questioning outdated beliefs, they rationalize them because change feels too uncertain. The backfire effect. When people are confronted with information that contradicts their beliefs, they don't change their minds. They double down on their existing views. This is why presenting facts often fails to persuade people. A groupthink. Humans evolved in social tribes where fitting in meant survival. Today, this manifests as a preference for conforming to widely accepted beliefs rather than questioning them. This deep psychological resistance to intellectual disruption explains why philosophers, scientists, and visionaries are often ignored or even persecuted during their lifetimes. Society does not naturally reward intelligence. It rewards social harmony. The digital age, a war on deep thinking. In the modern world, these psychological tendencies are being amplified by technology and media. Social media algorithms prioritize engagement over depth, meaning that viral content is often emotional, simplistic, and designed to confirm people's existing beliefs. A thought-provoking discussion struggles to gain traction because depth takes time, while viral content is instant, emotional, and easy to digest. A sensationalized sound bites outperform well-reasoned arguments. Echo chambers form, where people are only exposed to information that reinforces their worldview. This creates a feedback loop where intellectual depth is not just ignored, it is actively suppressed. The more a deep thinker challenges the mainstream narrative, the more resistance they face. But this raises a crucial question. If society naturally resists intelligence, what should deep thinkers do? Should they withdraw into isolation, or is there a way to navigate this resistance while preserving intellectual depth? If history proves that society rejects deep thinkers, does that mean intellectuals are doomed to isolation? Not necessarily. While the challenges are real, there are strategies that deep thinkers can use to navigate the world without losing themselves. 1. Choose your battles wisely. Not every conversation is an opportunity for deep discussion. Most social interactions are driven by politeness, small talk, and maintaining group cohesion, not the pursuit of truth. Instead of trying to force intellectual depth into every discussion, deep thinkers should recognize when people are genuinely open to new ideas versus when they are resisting change. Avoid wasting energy on debates with those who are not ready to think critically. Save their most profound ideas for those who appreciate them. Schopenhauer himself advised against sharing deep insights with those unprepared for them, warning that it could lead to unnecessary frustration and social friction. 2. Seek like-minded individuals. Instead of trying to fit into mainstream society, deep thinkers should focus on finding their intellectual tribe. Whether through books, online forums, academic circles, or personal friendships, there are always others who think deeply. Many of history's greatest minds found solace in small, intellectually rich circles rather than trying to convince the masses. Philosophy, literature, and science communities offer spaces where deep thinkers can thrive. Even in the digital age, it's possible to connect with those who value intellectual depth through carefully curated online spaces. 3. Learn the art of strategic communication. Deep thinkers often struggle with communication, not because their ideas are wrong, but because they express them in ways that overwhelm others. To be heard, they must simplify their language without compromising depth, making ideas more accessible without diluting them. Present ideas in a way that resonates emotionally, not just intellectually. Studies show that people are more likely to engage with ideas that connect to their emotions. Use storytelling. Humans are wired to absorb complex ideas more easily when they are presented as narratives rather than pure logic. Many of history's most influential thinkers were not just brilliant, they were effective communicators. Socrates, for example, did not simply state truths. He engaged people through questioning, forcing them to arrive at conclusions on their own. 4. Embrace solitude without becoming isolated. Many deep thinkers struggle with loneliness. They see through the illusions of society, making it harder to relate to everyday conversations. But solitude doesn't have to be a curse. It can be a source of strength. Schopenhauer saw solitude as a privilege, a time for intellectual and creative pursuits rather than a punishment. Some of the greatest minds in history, Nietzsche, Einstein, Da Vinci, embraced solitude to develop their deepest ideas. Instead of resenting being different, deep thinkers should see their introspective nature as an opportunity for profound personal growth. However, solitude should not turn into complete isolation. Even the most introverted thinkers benefit from meaningful relationships with those who understand them. 5. Accept that most will not understand, and that's okay. One of the greatest mental shifts a deep thinker can make is letting go of the need for mass acceptance. Most people resist deep thinking not because they are incapable, but because they prefer comfort over complexity. Socrates, Galileo, Nietzsche, Tesla, all were rejected in their time, yet their ideas shaped the world. Deep thinkers do not need universal approval. They need intellectual integrity, the courage to seek truth despite resistance. Instead of trying to force society to change, they should focus on planting seeds of thought, trusting that those ready to think will find their way. In the end, intelligence is both a gift and a burden. It allows deep thinkers to see the world more clearly, but it also distances them from those who prefer illusions. Schopenhauer put it best. A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial. But should this discourage deep thinkers? Absolutely not. While intelligence may bring loneliness, it also grants a freedom, the ability to think independently without being controlled by societal illusions. A wisdom, a deeper understanding of human nature and the world. A legacy, the power to influence future generations, even if recognition doesn't come in one's lifetime. Society does not fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence reveals. Those who think deeply are not rejected because they are wrong, but because they are right too soon. So if you have ever felt misunderstood for seeing the world differently, know this: you are not broken. You are simply ahead of your time. If this video resonated with you, if you've ever felt like an outsider for thinking too deeply, then you're not alone. This channel is a place for seekers of truth, questioners of reality, and those who refuse to accept the world at face value. So if you haven't already, hit that like button. It helps more deep thinkers like you find this content. And if you want to keep exploring the mysteries of philosophy, human nature, and the hidden truths of existence, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Let's continue questioning, learning, and thinking beyond the surface, together. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.